Oh, I'm Jay Kelly. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the problem I had with my Canik and its failure to feed. Turns out the problem really wasn't with the Canik, it was with me, but perhaps you had the similar problem and you can learn from my experiences. When I left my dealer and headed to the range, I was really kind of excited. I had made repeated visits to admire and handle this optic-equipped Canik Elite subcompact that was on his consignment shelf. While it was not new, it looked it. It fit my small hands very well, dry fired very smoothly, and the optic itself was easy to use. And now it was mine. I arrived at the range, set up targets, loaded my mags, and the gun just would not go into battery. If I slammed my hand hard against the rear of the slide, I could get it to close most of the time. The gun would then fire, extract the empty case, and start to load in the new cartridge, but again, fail to go into battery. More than half the mag would not feed. The gun was just not shootable. Okay, I emptied it, returned it to the dealer, then discuss it with him. Probably no warranty, second buyer, reloaded ammo, but he's a friend, a gunsmith, and I knew he'd help me out if he could. I explained the problem, and he took my mag and loaded it with factory metal-plated ammo and racked very easily every round through the gun. He then loaded my ammo, and every round failed to feed. So, this gun will not accept my ammo. Now what do we do? Well, there happened to be another gunsmith just there socializing, and between the three of us, we figured it out. Well, actually, they figured it out, and I paid attention. The problem's simple. My bullets were too wide and getting jammed in the barrel throat before the cartridge was fully seated, thus jamming the mechanism, and it would not go into battery. The answer? Change the ammo. Go to factory ammo. Seat the bullets deeper, or have the throat reamed out. What follows is a better explanation of the problem and the solutions that I came up with. I'm experienced, but not a trained gunsmith, so please excuse me if I get some of the fine details slightly off. First of all, I want to look at revolvers just to kind of set the stage a little bit. Revolvers have a gap between the cylinder and the barrel. Okay, the cylinder would not turn if this were not the case. Next, when a round is loaded into a revolver, notice this is a dummy round, no primer. When a round is loaded into the cylinder, there is a gap between the front of the bullet and the front of the cylinder. Okay, the bullet never sticks out past the edge of the cylinder. Again, that would jam the mechanism if that were the case. So the bullet never actually touches the barrel until it is fired. Then it jumps this gap and enters the barrel. Semi-autos are a little bit differently. Okay, let me take this apart so I can show you a little bit easier. The chamber and the barrel are all one piece. The diameter of the chamber is cut wider than the diameter of the barrel. This creates a shelf where the two meet, and just below the shelf is a smooth section that I believe is called the throat, and then the rifling begins. I took a picture earlier today where I had a flashlight shining up the front of the barrel, creating the illumination so you could see this. The greater diameter of the chamber, the smaller diameter of the barrel itself, creating this shelf. The way it should work, when a cartridge is loaded into the chamber, it should drop all the way to the front edge of the cartridge case, makes contact with that shelf. I don't know if you could hear that or not, but it makes a distinct clunk when it hits the shelf. The back of the cartridge case should be flush with the hood. This approach or technique is something that's called head spacing. The diameter of the bullet is less than the diameter of the case, and therefore the bullet should protrude into the barrel when the front edge of the case makes contact with that shelf. And again, when it's correct, it should just drop into place and you hear it as the front edge of the case makes contact with that shelf. And the back of the case is flush with the hood. Okay? For all of this to work well, the tip of the bullet must be narrow enough not to hang up when the round is chambering. If the base of the bullet will be wide enough, the base that's back within the case will be wide enough that when the bullet is fired down the barrel, it's grabbed by the rifling and spun, increasing accuracy. The problem is the transition from the wide base that's inside the case to the narrow tip, the bullet profile. My bullets are wide near the top and were getting stuck in the throat area. The recoil spring just did not have enough force to push them deep enough so that the cartridge could be fully seated against that shelf with the back of the cartridge case flush with the back of the hood. So why didn't factory ammo have the problem? Well, perhaps shape. Narrower from the case mouth to the tip, or perhaps depth. A shorter overall length means the bullet is seated further down inside the case with less of it sticking out above it. Plus, metal plated rounds are more slippery than those that are polymer plated. Reading depth. Let me try and illustrate this for you. Move my pieces parts over here to the side. Bring out my prop. Okay. Here are 3 cartridges that I have produced. The 2 cartridges on the left use the same blue bullets that I use currently, round nose blue bullet with a 125 grain. The one on the left has an overall length of 1.146 inches, while the one in the center here is 1.15. Notice how much more bulky the one on the left appears. It hangs up in that throat area that I was talking about, does not load properly. The second one, the bullet does not extend quite as far, doesn't make contact with the throat area as much. It's making contact more on the sharper edge near the tip, and it loads smoothly. Shape. The metal plated round here on the right is 1.127 inches long, so that's right between the length of these 2. While it's longer than the short blue bullet cartridge, the sharper profile that you see with the metal plated round allows it to chamber with no issues. My standard recipe was the blue bullet, 125 grain, round nosed, over 5 grains of CFE pistol powder with an overall length of 1.150 inches, which is the most common max length shown for 125 grain plated bullets in my Lee reloading manual, and comfortably between the max of 1.169 inches and the apparent minimum of 1.095 inches for 9mm rounds. I use a Dillon Square Deal press. It applies a taper crimp at the 4th station. This presses the case into the side of the bullet, but it doesn't really dig into it. So my first step, or first attempt at a solution, was to take the bullets that weren't chambering and, in essence, reseat them by pushing the bullet further down into the cartridge case and then recrimping it again. Seating the bullet deeper would reduce this bulky area around the case mouth and allowed, hopefully, the cartridge to fully seat. Next, what I did was I took the actual barrel and I barrel checked every round. They should drop all the way, as I indicated before, so that the front of the case touches that shelf that's inside there, and the back of the cartridge is flush with the end of the hood. Most did, but some did not. I marked those that were close but had hung up a tad. At the range, I then tested for pressure, making sure velocities were in a safe range. They were. The unmarked rounds all worked fine. They had all been barrel tested. In this particular barrel, they all seated properly. The gun cycled correctly. No problems of any kind. Most of the marked ones were close and they worked as well, but some did not work. Some were jammed, although not as bad or as tight as they were before. So the solution appeared to be develop a recipe for a shorter round. Find the distance that's proper for seating, the amount of powder that will give me the velocity that I want, etc. Come up with a recipe. Then, whatever recipe I'm using, barrel check every round produced. Mark as test ammo those that do not drop all the way home. Okay? Is that a solution? Absolutely. It'll guarantee every round I'll have in competition will have been barrel checked and every round is going to work perfectly. But that's going to take a lot of time and aggravation. Is there another alternative? Yeah. Get the throat reamed out. Make the throat wider. I wasn't really willing to do that yet. So I came up, with another solution. This was a little creative. And what I did was I took a worn brass bore brush that had been worn down quite a bit. Plastic might work, but brass is a little bit more sticky. Then I cut a piece of 400 wet dry sandpaper. I wet it, then wrapped it tightly around the bore brush. And I want to wrap it in such a way that the back end overlaps the front end just a hair. And then squeeze it onto the bristles of the brass bore brush. And then chuck it into your drill. And then when you drive it slowly, because the back end overlaps the front a little bit, as it twists, it will keep the sandpaper on there tightly. And what you want to do is just have this in here and just go back and forth a little bit on that throat and that throat area. You don't want to get down into the rifle and you don't want to mess that up. But what you want to do is just smooth out that throat area. Okay? Lightly go back and forth as it spins, and you can feel it. You can feel it starting to smooth out a little bit, and you only go in a little bit. Remember, the cartridge case is not going that far. You're actually only going in to this area right here. Don't go all the way down, so you're only going in about that far. And you want to smooth out that area that's the throat just below the shelf where the barrel meets the chamber itself. Once you've done it with 400 wet dry sandpaper, take a piece of 1,000 wet dry sandpaper. Do the same thing. And then finally take a cloth patch, wrap around the bore brush, and then put some metal polish on. I use semi-chrome, but I guess any kind of metal polish would be fine. And again, do it just gently, back and forth, back and forth. What you're doing is smoothing out that throat area so that it will be a little bit easier for the rounds to slide home. Now, the results, I do chamber check my rounds, but I no longer remove the barrel and actually barrel check them. And I found I've fired close to 1,000 rounds that have been through this process and had no failure to feed at all. The problem was, if you will, the barrel is constructed to very tight tolerances. I can't blame Canik for that. That's going to increase accuracy. And it works with factory ammo. My hand-loaded ammo didn't fit those tolerances, but I didn't want to give up my recipe because I've been using it for years with multiple thousands of rounds, and I found it to be very, very accurate in all of my guns. And so I made the adjustments that have been described in this particular video so that I come up with a solution where my hand-loaded rounds 100% fit in that every time, and it is as accurate as it was before. So I went through a learning process, and hopefully my experience can help you through yours. As always, shoot safe.